Shalom Alashem, Erev Tov, good evening. We are together for the first time in 2 years. My heart is finally back to a normal pace. Everything that was not working before is now working. Baruch Hashem. We are finally back in the Shiviti UK classes. I know many of you have been learning with me regardless of the time zone or the time differences and the classes that are in New York time and San Diego time and those that are on YouTube. And I've been in touch with pretty much everybody here over the last 2 years. Finally together, Baruch Hashem. We had a wonderful matzah bake this Sunday. I wish all of you would have been a part of it, but I'm sure that I shared enough videos to make you feel like you were part of it. I want to tell you what my plan is for the coming few weeks, because we have a shiur tonight and a shiur next week at this time, hopefully starting actually on time. And then 2 classes after Pesach, after which B'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach, and my wife and I hope to be with you in person in the UK. So we started off the shiur in the writings of Rabbi Shemtob Gaguine, who was one of the Chachamim of the Sephardic community in London and Manchester, and a number of other places. And I left a part of his teachings that I thought I was going to be able to finish before COVID was over, and I never did. And that's as relevant as ever for me to jump into right now. I'm not certain how many of you actually remember all the details of everything we studied then. It's been a while, but for those of you who are watching this on YouTube and you went from 2 years ago to today, probably none of it is going to matter because it was an hour ago. But for those of you in person, Rabbi Shemtob Gaguine was giving us an introduction to Halakha, to the way the Jewish world works, to the problems that are inherent and exist in the Jewish community. And one of them was this discrepancy between Sephardic and Ashkenazi Halakha and the conflicts that it causes inside of the Jewish community. And before I go any further, I just want to share with you why, in general, it was important that we have a Beit HaMikdash that is based out of the UK. And it has a lot to do with you, probably everything to do with you, a lot less to do with me. Baruch Hashem. And my hands are pretty full over here in San Diego and everything else that we do here. But there was something special that took place in the UK, that I experienced in the UK, that I feel that is important to share. And it's okay to share it on camera. And I mean no disrespect to the American citizens who are here in the room. When I first traveled to the UK, it was not the first time in my life, but the first time as an adult, as a rabbi who came to teach there. It was on a stopover on the way to Cape Town, South Africa. And I'd flown from San Diego to London, London to Cape Town, and the way back through Johannesburg was a 36-hour trip. For whatever reason, I didn't calculate my time properly with the books that I brought and the things that I needed. It was a pretty boring trip in terms of flying on an airplane, and I decided I needed to find something to read. So in the San Diego airport, I went into the bookshop over there and I looked around for books that I might find interesting, things that were not, obviously things that were kasher, but things that were intelligent and satisfying to read. And when I went in the nonfiction section, the religion section, the psychology section, the history section, I think the most intellectually stimulating book that I found in the airport here in the United States was a book about Mr. Rogers. A wonderful person, by the way. I grew up watching Mr. Rogers. But if you don't know who Mr. Rogers was, a childhood character, a TV show, was a very interesting personality. He may have been even Christian clergy in some place or some point in his life. That was the most intelligent book that I found on the bookshelf. And for whatever reason, I wasn't in the mood of reading about Mr. Rogers. So I toughed it out until I got to the UK, and I said, maybe I'll try over there. When I walked into the library, the bookstore in the airport in London Heathrow, the exact opposite thing happened to me than when I was in the United States. And that was, I was surrounded by books that I said, wow, I wish I could buy 10 or 11 or 12 of these books. And very quickly, something clicked in my mind, and you could say that I'm judging things by bookstores. Maybe I shouldn't. The population of Jews that I was lucky enough to meet in my time and my wife's time together in the United Kingdom were people who were deep thinkers, truth seekers, able to handle intelligent conversation, able to learn Torah and the sophistication that my wife and I always expect inside of the Beit HaMikdash. Now, in San Diego, Baruch Hashem, I merited to have a whole Kehillat full of people like that. But again, we sit in San Diego, surrounded by a much larger Jewish community that doesn't always connect with the type of Torah that we teach or we study or we learn here together in the Beit HaMikdash. And coming to the United Kingdom, I found another community in the world that I felt, here are people who are able to, whether they agree at the end of the day or disagree or think differently than we do, doesn't matter. But this community that we've created here is something very special. It's very dear to us. And for the last 2 years, it hasn't not been in our minds. Simply, we've been all over the world doing all kinds of things, and all of you have been a part of that, whether it has been on a weekly basis or not. And about that, I recall the writings of the Chayei Adam. There was a famous Ashkenazi Chacham. His name was Rabbi Avraham Danzig, otherwise known as Danziger, because he came from a place called Danzig. And right before the publication of the Mishnah Berurah, the Chavetz Chaim's monumental work in Halakha, he was pretty much the Halachic authority of Eastern European Jewry. He was also famously never a Rosh HaYeshiva or a Dayan or a rabbi in a Beit Knesset. He served the Jewish community as a Torah scholar, but for his personal finances, he was a business person. And in fact, he asked that on his tombstone, nothing else should be inscribed on it except for Avraham Danzig, Nasa v'natan be'emunah, one who did business honestly. He wanted everyone to know he was an honest business person. And there was an introduction to one of his books in which he talks about the people around him that mocked him. How could a person who's just a businessman who travels from here to there all day long, is selling things, moving things, merchandise from one place to another, when did he have a chance to learn Torah that he purports to be some kind of Torah scholar, some kind of posek? And he writes words that come from the heart. In fact, there's an Israeli musician who even made a song out of these words. And he says, you should know that everywhere that I went, every business trip that I went to, I never stopped taking with me my Mishnah, my Chumash, my Shulchan Aruch. My books always came with me. And whenever I had a chance to look into my books, I looked into them. And even when I didn't get a chance, every time I got a chance, it was like I picked up from where I left off. And what about the rabbinic teaching? That if I leave you for one day, you might as well be leaving me for 2 days, meaning that when a person stops studying Torah, that really you create a disconnect which you're never able to bridge that gap. He said that only is true about a person who really disconnects himself from one day to the next day. But for me, my mind, when I was walking, I thought about the Torah. When I was sitting, I thought about the Torah. When I was eating, I thought about the Torah. Everything I did, I thought about the Torah. And therefore, whenever I came back to the Torah, it's like I never left in the first place. And that's how I feel about this group of people right here. You are people that I consider my friends, people that are very dear to me and to my family and to my community. And even if we haven't had a chance to learn Torah together yesterday or the day before that, I know that every place that I've been to in the last 2 years, every class that I've taught in the last 2 years, everything that we've done as part of a Shiviti community, if it's in San Diego, in LA, in New York, in Portland, in Seattle, wherever it has been, in Israel, wherever it has been, always my mind was on you, always. And so I feel like there's no need for me to bridge a 2-year divide because we haven't been gone for 2 years. In fact, we learned together yesterday, and today, B'ezrat Hashem, will continue exactly from where we left off. And it's a zechut for me. Really, it's an honor for me to consider all of you members of this Bet Midrash. And I, as always, I thank you for putting your trust and your attention to this place, because really, we feel the same way about you. So without any further ado, I wanted to jump into the source sheets. There's a PDF entitled, it's titled Keter Shem Tov, Volume 3, pages 1 to 30. Do you see that? Yes, okay. So you want to open it up. I am horrible with Roman numerals, so someone is going to help me out. I think I'm talking about page 28. So it's XXV and then 3 I's. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Did anyone find the page? Yes? In your PDF, it should come out to page. In your PDF, it should come out on the top of page 26. So it should be 26 on the PDF pages. Correct? Great. Rabbi Shemtob Gaguine has been presenting us in the last pages of discrepancies between what Maran or the Rambam write in the Shulchan Aruch and Mishneh Torah, and what the Rama writes in his notes on the Shulchan Aruch. In the past, we discussed things like rabbis accepting money for their jobs. We discussed through different areas of halakha in terms of food and other things. Today, we're going to discuss two main areas. One from the section of Choshen Mishpat, and one perhaps relevant to our life today, which is a conversation surrounding the kashrut of meat. But before I jump into any of that, let's just start reading on the top of Shulchan Aruch, Choshen Mishpat. When the codes of halakha were written, so the first main code of halakha that was written after the Talmud, a code that someone could study and read from. Who is the first codifier of halachot after the Talmud? It provides us with an A to Z. Before the Mishneh Torah.
The two?
Before the two. Maran bases his book on three Chachamim. Who are they?
The Rosh, the Rif, and the Rambam.
Right, the Rosh, the Rif, and the Rambam. Thank you, Rachel. So the Rif, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi. Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi summarizes the Talmud. He makes a code of law. In the back of the Talmud, you can find it, where he redacts the Talmud, takes out all the stories, takes out all the conversations, all the arguments, all the debates. He removes all of that. And what does he do? He leaves only the Piskei Halakha. If you want to look up a halakha in the Rif, you need to know the Talmud. Meaning he presupposes that a person knows a tremendous amount of information, and all they're looking for now is, I need to realize what is the actual law. There was another rabbi who codified the whole Torah. You mentioned him already. That is the Rambam. The Rambam, he writes how many volumes of halakha? 14. Yeah? Hayad HaChazakah, the strong hand, Yud Dalet is 14. Rambam writes 14 books of Jewish law, and in essence reorganizes the Talmud. So instead of organizing halachot based on the order of the Talmud, the Rambam instead organizes halachot based on the order of one chapter leads to the next chapter, leads to the next chapter, in a very logical order. The Rambam reorganizes the entire oral law into clear and precise categories. And if you've ever studied the Mishnah Torah, you can realize that brilliance is not just in what's written there, but in the order in which it's written and the clarity in which it's written. Along comes the tool, and he wants to write a book of halakha. Unlike his father, the Rosh, who writes something based on the order of the Talmud, the tool decides instead not to focus on any of the halachot that are not relevant to Jews living right now, in exile, without a temple, without a Bet HaMikdash, without any of that. And therefore he composes what he calls the Arba Turim, or the Tur, Shulchan Aruch, as you might call it today. That is broken up into how many volumes?
I mean, if it's Arba Turim, then it's just...
Very good. Miriam, I'm glad. The skills of deduction. So there's 4. Anyone know what they are? Orach Chaim. That's the first one. Help me out. Yoreh De'ah, Choshen Mishpat, Even Ha'ezer. Okay, likely the Even Ha'ezer, the Choshen Mishpat. But here you have the following. Orach Chaim are the laws of day-to-day life, from waking up in the morning, washing your hands, blessings on food, prayer, Shabbat, holidays. All of that is in the first section of the Shulchan Aruch. The second, Yoreh De'ah. Yoreh De'ah has in it the laws of kashrut, the laws of nida, the laws of conversion, the laws of learning Torah, the laws of tzedakah. All of these halachot, mezuzah, so on and so forth, are in the section of Yoreh De'ah. The third section of Even Ha'ezer, the laws of marriage, the laws of divorce, the laws of yibum and chalitza, everything that has to do with marriage or divorce. And then finally, the laws of Choshen Mishpat, which are all about business dealings, finances, partnerships, stealing, robbery, theft, lost objects, everything to do with what we might say civil or business law is in the 4th section. When Maran decides to write his Shulchan Aruch, he breaks down the halachot into the same 4 categories of the tool, likely because he also was not intending to write a book of law for the future, for the Bet HaMikdash, for when the Jews are all back in Israel. We know that Maran's primary hope, those of you who are in my classes in the UK, on the 3-part series on Maran, Maran's primary hope was that when the Jews would gather together in Eretz Yisrael, what would happen?
have Sanhedrin?
We'd have a Sanhedrin. And if we had a Sanhedrin, then we wouldn't need to rehash old halachot. We would have a living body that would be able to unite the Jewish people around one legal system that was alive and well and functioning. When Maran sees that doesn't happen, his plan B is to write a Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch, and you must know, is always plan B. But plan B is, here we are, this is our situation. Not only are we without a Sanhedrin, we are also a Jewish people that are scattered and who hold many different opinions based on many different rabbis who have taught us the oral Torah since the time of our exile. And Maran does his best to unite us around three pillars of halakha, ultimately making everybody upset. The Sephardim, the Ashkenazim, the purest of the Maimonideans, the purest of the Ashkenazim, everyone he makes upset. Usually that's how compromise works, is that not everyone is going to be happy all of the time. What Maran also does, though, is something incredible. Because he was able to compromise, so what ends up happening is that it's probably the text that the most Jewish people in our history have ever rallied around or behind. And I know that in recent years, there have been a lot of upheaval surrounding the Shulchan Aruch. Maybe the Shulchan Aruch is not a pure book. It's not a perfect book. We should go back to the Mishnah Torah, and we should, and we should, and we should. And it's closer to Talmudic Law, so on and so forth. I've discussed this at length in many other places. Lemase, push comes to shove. Aside from in Yemen, you are not going to find a bedin of a functional community, especially of Sephardim, outside of Yemen, which did not decide, at least formally, that its code of law that they were going to govern their community with or preside over their bedin with was the Shulchan Aruch. Everyone accepted upon themselves, not blind obedience to, but the general working according to the rulings of the Shulchan Aruch. And that being said, we're up to the final section of Shulchan Aruch, and Rabbi Shemtob Gaguine wants to point out a few discrepancies that he found between Maran and the Rama, which are rooted in an understanding of whether or not Talmudic law is binding on us or is not. Look at the top of the page. In Choshen Mishpat, section 73, and that's in our source sheet. So if you want to open up the source sheet parallel, I quote that halakha for you. Katav Rama binyan hamalveh al hamashkon. Regarding a person who is borrowing with a mashkon, how do you say this? Collateral? Is that the word we use in English? What are we referring to? Someone wants to borrow something. They need money. And in order to get money from you, what do they give you? I'm going to remind you there's a button that says mute or unmute. You're able to mute and unmute yourself. Yeah, say it again.
Just something of value. Should they not return the money, then you keep it.
Very good. Something of value that you're going to hold on to in the event that they don't pay back their money. So they give you that. How long do you have to hold onto that object for? Meaning, until when do they have to repay their loan? Say?
I guess until they repay their loan.
Until they repay their loan. Now, who decides how long the loan lasts for? You buy a car, you buy a house. How do you know how long you have to pay back the loan?
The person who loans it to you.
Very good. I mean, this is an agreement made between the one who's loaning money and the one who's borrowing money. How long do I have to repay the loan? Now, we always follow the rules of the contract, whatever the agreement was between both parties. In the event that there was no verbal or written agreement between the parties as to how long one has to pay back, is anyone familiar with the halakha that rules what a general loan, how long a general loan lasts for? For 30 days. So the assumption is 30 days. Now, if it was supposed to be longer, it will be longer. But after 30 days, the question is, what does a person do after 30 days? Really, after 30 days are over, what should you be able to do with the object that the person has left with you? Sell it. For what purpose?
Repay the loan.
Very good. To get back your money. Meaning you lent someone money. They were not good for their loan. So you took whatever object they left with you and you sold it. Katav Rama. So the Rama writes, En yachol lemochro rak achar avur shana temima. You're not allowed to sell that object until 1 year later. Why? V'chen hu dina de malchuta. Because that's the law of the country, that's the law of the kingdom in which we live. So even though halakha says that right afterwards you're able to go to the bedin, or let's say the loan was for 14 days, so on day 15 you can go to the bedin and sell your object with their permission or in their presence or however that might work. You look at the laws of loans on your own, and if you wanted to, the Rambam has very clearly all of those halachot set up for you. The Rama says, nonetheless, even though our Chachamim let us sell it right away, you have to wait a whole year. Why do you have to wait a whole year? Meaning, why am I out money for a whole year? Because of the law of the land. The law of the country requires that I don't sell things right away. And so here you find yet another instance where even though the Talmud says something and the Rambam agrees, Shulchan Aruch agrees, along comes the Rama and says in Eastern Europe, we don't follow the Talmud, we don't follow the Rambam, we don't follow the Shulchan Aruch, rather we follow whatever the non-Jews around us consider to be right and proper. Now, I don't want to throw the Rama under the bus. So Rabbi Shemtob Gaguine, in this whole introduction, a few different places really throws the Rama under the bus. Rabbi Moshe Yisraelish, the Rama, is not a nobody. He's not a small-time Chacham. He's a very tremendous Talmid Chacham, and there's a reason why the Ashkenazim consider him to be so authoritative. The Rama explains in Shin Samech Tet, in section 369, over there in Halacha Yud Aleph 11, the Rama explains that there are times where the law of the land is important because it helps for the betterment of society. For whatever reason, extending the time that someone can repay the loan is better for society. It's better that people are not so strict about this area. And so the Bedin has the right to alter halakha in accordance with the law of the land whenever it is a better thing for society. And so I'm trying not to throw the Rama under the bus, but again, you find here a situation where the Rama disagrees with that which is written in the Talmud and rules against it. Sham, another example. דהכי נהיגה עכשיו להחזיר כל גנבה, אפילו אחר ייאוש ושינוי רשות משום דינה דמלכותם. In section 365 of Chosh HaMishpat, Rama has another interesting halakha. Maybe I can open up a Rambam for you. I lost a little bit of time at the beginning of the class. I don't want to lose more. So let's do this. According to halakha, when a person steals an object, so let's set up a scenario. I'm afraid to use names. I don't want anyone to think I'm thinking that you're a thief. Let's say there is David. He steals an object from Moshe, and he sells it to Yaakov. So David is a thief. He stole an object from Moshe. Who has to pay back Moshe? David has to pay back Moshe if he gets caught with a stolen object. What happens once Moshe finds the object has already been purchased by Yaakov? So Moshe is walking in the store. He sees something in the store. He says, hey, that's mine. That was stolen from me. Now who has to pay back the object? The store owner? Does he have to pay back the object? Does the thief pay back the object? In halakha, you have a very interesting conversation. You know what? Let's open a Rambam. I'm sorry. I don't want to say things by heart. I'm not sure if this is in your source sheet. Did I put there? How about now? Back. Let me read to you the Rambam. Did I put a source in the source sheet from the laws of Geneva, the laws of stealing? In the Sefaria source sheet? I don't remember if I did. So if you want, I see I got zoomed out all the way. 1 second. Did you still hear me? Great. If you open up Sefaria to the book of Geneva, the laws of theft is how they might translate it into English in the Rambam's Mishnah Torah. The Rambam says the following: Asur liknot min haganav hachefetz sheganav. It is forbidden to buy stolen goods from someone who stole them. Ve'avon gadol hu, it's a great sin. Shari mechazek yedei ovrei avera. You are strengthening the hands of criminals. Ve'gorem lo lignov genevot acherot, and you cause people to steal more. Why? She'im lo yimtza lokeach eno gonev. Meaning, if I know that when I steal something, there is no one to sell it to because Jews don't buy stolen merchandise, then I won't steal. Meaning, it's not a business that's worth getting into if no one's going to buy my goods. But if I know that when I steal things, people can buy them for me, then I'm going to continue this business. Chachamim tell us the following: Hagonevu machar. So someone who steals something and then sells it to someone else. V'lo nityashu haba'alim. And the original owners did not give up hope of recovering that object. V'achar kach hukar haganav. And afterwards they find the thief. Uvau hedim shezeh hachefetz shemcharo peloni zeh hu genavo b'fanenu chozer hachefetz leva'alav. If there are witnesses that can say that's the object that was stolen in front of us, we return the object to the original owner. והבעלים נותנים ללוקח דמים ששקע לגנב מפני תקנת השוק. And so the owners give money to the thief. והבעלים חוזרים ועושים דין עם הגנב. And then the owners come to the bedin and sue him back for that money. But if the original owners already gave up hope, it doesn't matter when it happened. We don't give back the actual stolen goods to the original owner. There are situations where we give back the object, situations we give back the money. There are situations in which we give back the object to the original owner, situations where we give back the object to the thief. And all of this is done mipnei takanat hashuk. In order to fix the economy, you can't have a situation where everyone is afraid to buy from a middleman because they're afraid that I bought from a middleman, it ends up being stolen goods. Tomorrow someone comes to my store and they can take back their goods and I'm the one who's lost without any money. In these kinds of scenarios, there are halachot. And the halachot require that after the original owners have given up hope, it's called yeush. What is the status of property that was stolen that one has given up hope about? Yeush means that this object is now ownerless. It's ownerless. Along comes the Rama, and the Rama says, "Dehachi nehige achshav lachzir kol geneva afilu achar yeush v'shinui reshut mishum dina demalchuta." Now we give back objects that were stolen all the time, no matter when, no matter what the original owners thought, because of the law of the land. Again, you find a situation where halakha is very clear, and along comes the Rama and says, we Ashkenazim don't follow that law because of the non-Jewish government. So I don't know about you, but the area of financial law and stealing and all those things, it's not my exciting place. It's not my happy place that I go to study halakha. In fact, if I were to sit in a class in those halachot, likely I would fall asleep. So with your permission, I'd like to jump to the next category of halachot that Maran, Rabbi Shemtob Gaguine finds troublesome. Does anyone here own a dog? Okay, maybe not. For those people who want to own dogs or have owned dogs, you might not be familiar with the halachot of owning dogs. Now, I own animals also. I know in California we don't say anymore we own animals, but we have the privilege to live with animals, whatever it might be that we're in. But for right now, there's an interesting halakha. In section 409 of the Shulchan Aruch, hey, look with me at the Shulchan Aruch, 409. It's in the source sheet, so you should find Choshen Mishpat, 409. It's mamash almost at the end. Do you see that in the source sheet? Okay. Maran writes the following. Asur legadel kelev ra. He's quoting the Rambam, was quoting the Talmud. It is forbidden to raise an evil dog. What does an evil dog mean? What makes a dog evil?
Maybe something that just like people kind of.
Good. Okay, so we're not talking about a dog who doesn't put on tefillin or something. We're talking about a dog that is an evil dog, as in it bites people. It's a vicious dog. That's probably a better word. A vicious dog. It's dangerous. אלא אם כן הוא אסור בשלשלאות של ברזל וקשור בהם. Unless he is chained up with an iron chain and tied down. Now, why would a person own a dog that is so vicious? What's the purpose of having a dog? It's not to play fetch with him or to cuddle with him on the couch watching TV. What's the purpose of having a vicious dog? Yeah, for security. This is the security dog. And so he lives outside, he guards the property. But there's an exception to this rule. Uve'ir hasemucha lesefar. All of the cities that are close to the border. I want you to think about October 7th. People who live along the border, a dangerous border. In that place, the halakha is different. Mutar legadelo, you're allowed to raise vicious dogs. Vekoshro bayom. And you should have the dog tied up during the day. So to be restrained during the day. Umatiro balayla. And you let the dog loose at night. What's the logic behind that? Tell me. Okay, I'll ask the question clearer. Why is it that in a border town you're allowed to raise a wild dog, whereas inside of a city you shouldn't do that? What's the difference? What's better about a border city?
I mean, there's a different danger from, I'd say, any invaders, and whereas in the city it would just be a nuisance to people, dogs running around biting people.
Very good. So in the border, there's an extra security concern, and therefore our sages allow us to raise a vicious dog there. But here's the but. The nighttime, you're allowed to let the dog run around. But in the daytime, you cannot do that. Why? What's the reason? During the daytime, we assume, what? That it's safe.
And people go around their business. So, I mean, that would also cause harm to like all your neighbors, whereas at night, people are supposed to stay in bed and sleep. So if there's anybody running around, that's just on them if they get bitten.
Very good. Let's say better. The people who are running around at night are usually the people who shouldn't be there at night. And therefore, you're allowed to let the guard dog out at night, but not during the day. Fine. This is a halakha that is accepted from the Talmud. It's in the Rambam. It's in Shulchan Aruch. In fact, the Rambam even includes the people who raise wild dogs as from the people that are excommunicated and don't have the ability to do teshuvah. I added that source sheet over there. I added that source to the source sheet. There's even an extra halakha. I don't know if you know about widows living with dogs. That's already outside of the scope of this conversation. It's a whole different halakha. I just put it there out of a curiosity for anybody who wants to jump into the halachot of owning dogs. But for right now, along comes the Rama. And what does the Rama write? Says Rabbi Shemtob Gaguine. The Rama says, Achar shemaran ha-Bet Yosef, he'etik din ha-Gemara. Once Maran, the Bet Yosef, records the law as stated by the Talmud, Upasku Arif Rambam, and the Rambam and the Arif both ruled halakha this way. Shasur legadel kelev ra betoch beto, that it's forbidden to raise a vicious dog in one's home. Siem harama, the Rama writes, Dehashta shanu sheruim benehem bechol inyan share. Nowadays that we live amongst the non-Jews, then it's allowed in any situation to raise wild dogs. Now, I'm sure there are those who interpret different things in the writings of the Rama. But again, what do you see? You see, once again, that the Rama is going against the law of the Talmud. It could be for a good reason, could be not. But ultimately, there's this reputation, this stereotype that exists in the world, that somehow, those who follow the Shulchan Aruch are so lenient in halakha. They're violating halakha right and left. And somehow the Rama and the communities that follow the Rama are so strict about halakha, and they're so particular about halakha. The whole purpose of everything we have studied until today is Rabbi Shemtob Gaguine trying to show it's not the case. There are simply communities that follow the Talmud and communities that follow the Talmud less. And why do we have to apologize if our following of the Talmud sometimes makes us more lenient, sometimes makes us more stringent? It's not about leniency or stringency, but it's everything to do with, are we obedient to the code of law that our rabbis put before us, or are we not? And why do we treat communities that do not follow the codes of halakha, why do we treat them as superior? Why do we look up to them? Why do we have an inferiority complex towards them? And these are real questions that need to be answered. There's one more example that he's going to give, and this is really what I want to dwell on for the rest of today's shiur, before we get into the more theoretical conversation next week, B'ezrat Hashem. And really, as I announced the class, I announced that we were going to be starting in next week's class. So I'm finishing up something I should have finished up 2 years ago, and I appreciate your patience with me as I do that. And this part perhaps pains me now, especially at this time of year. We're approaching the holiday of Pesach. And as we get closer to Pesach, I find more and more that this inferiority complex that exists, and listen to me carefully when I say, I'm not saying Sephardim and Ashkenazim, because as you know me for all the years that you've known me, I never separate the Jewish people on those divides, and in fact, I try my hardest not to separate Jewish people in general. But where I'm talking about those who observe halakha according to one approach, and those who observe halakha according to the other approach, and one can be Ashkenazi who follows Sephardic halachot, meaning they're biologically one way, but philosophically the other way, so then I consider those people to be Sephardim. And I have my fair share of Sephardim whose Jewish views just fall out on the other side of the aisle, and therefore, I'm sure you understand that when I say Shulchan Aruch and the Rama, I refer to the people who follow the philosophy and the approach of those different poskim. As it relates to kashrut, every single year I see in the Pesach guides that come out all kinds of gibberish and nonsense about the rulings of Sephardim. For example, there's one famous one that comes out here every year, and it says, it's forbidden to eat kitniot on Passover. Meaning it's forbidden to have rice or beans or corn or whatever else on Passover. But some Sephardic Jews are lenient in this matter, and then some other nonsense. Like they can only consume kitniot with our special certification that they buy from us at 4 times the price or something. I mean, usually something like that. They omit the part where they're ripping everybody off, but they tell you that there's some kind of exception to the rule. Or all of the communities don't do this on Pesach, but you'll find some unreliable kosher agencies that approve A, B, C, or D. And you say, it's not unreliable to follow the Talmud or the Rambam or Shulchan Aruch. Why do you feel so comfortable throwing half of Am Yisrael, if not more, under the bus? Because there is this attitude that somehow the people who don't eat rice or don't eat corn or don't eat beans, or there's such trivial things, by the way, are so far superior in their observance of kashrut to the rest of the Jewish community that somehow we should be, one day we will reach that level where we also stop eating things that God never told us to stop eating, that Moshe Rabbeinu never heard about, the Shulchan Aruch never knew about. That's the place that we're supposed to be inside of the Jewish community. And unfortunately, very often, there are many people who feel very uncomfortable. Look, it's Pesach time. Every year I get questions. What am I supposed to tell my guests? They come to my house. Should I tell them that I'm feeding them things that are not kosher in the Pesach? Why are you walking around on eggshells when you're the one that's following Judaism and other people have invented something fabricated entirely and they feel like they are superior to you, and now you're trembling and shivering? For what purpose? For which reason? And so that brings me to this next section about kashrut. I have to tell you that I am no expert in shechita. Do I have any shochatim here in this call? Anybody who knows shechita? Great. So we'll all do this together. When it came time to learn shechita in the yeshiva, Mori Harav Yaakov Peretz wanted me to study shechita very much. He said, you never know where you're going to end up in the world. You're going to have to slaughter animals. And I tried. I'm not going to lie to you. I tried. I tried to hold an animal in my hands and cut off its head, and I couldn't do it. And don't think that I'm some wonderful person. I mean, I eat chicken and I eat meat. Like I do enjoy eating meat. It's not. Don't think I'm not coming here in some self-righteousness. I simply couldn't bring myself to kill an animal. I just couldn't do it. One time, and those of you who've been to my home, you know that I have many animals in my home. One time, one of my birds, I had a parrot that was sick, and I was trying to help it. I was holding it down to wash a wound that it got, and it died in my hands. And you can ask my wife. I think for the next 3 or 4 days, I was beside myself. I'm not embarrassed to tell you that. I couldn't handle the fact that something died in my hand. It wasn't even a human. It was an animal. I knew it was sick, but it broke me. So to think about having a job where I would hold chickens or cows and just kill them all day long, I'm telling you, I'm not coming from a place of self-righteousness. I eat those steaks. I have them. It's not like I'm thinking I'm better. I just couldn't bring myself to do that. And I told Harav Peretz that I couldn't do it. He said, you have misplaced compassion. But I really I never studied the laws of Shechita as deeply as I should have because it was never relevant or practical to my life. There's a famous war between Sephardim and Ashkenazim surrounding the kashrut of meat. Who can help me out about this war? What am I referring to?
Is it the Glatt kosher thing?
Yeah, very good. Glatt or Halak. Tell me what we're talking about.
It's when the lungs, well, they check the lungs, and if they can patch it, Ashkenazim, then they use it. That's whereas Sephardim don't use it.
Okay. Okay, very good. So,
I mean, they patch it and they blow air and see if it holds.
right. I forgot to bring that volume. It's in my source sheet. Shulchan Aruch, Maran tells us, let's open up the source sheet in Sefaria. Maran tells us the following. It should say Yoreh De'ah 39. Do you see that? It's source 9. Maran writes that when you check an animal, so after you slaughter the animal is still not kasher. You also have to check the animal to make sure that it has no wounds or blemishes that would disqualify it. Maran says, אין צריך לבדוק אחר שום טרפות מן הסתם, חוץ מן הריאה צריך לבדוק בבהמה וחיה אם יש בה סירחה. We don't have an obligation to check every part of every animal. It's not a requirement. But the lungs, we have to check out to see if they are intact or not. I see that the way that it formatted this is that it didn't break up the Shulchan Aruch in terms of halachot. So if you click on that link, it should take you to the actual Shulchan Aruch. You should do that. Click on where it says Shulchan Aruch Yoreh De'ah 39. Look in halacha number 10. Maran says anytime, so when you find a blemish on the lung, a sircha, some kind of English word for sircha, like a string, like an excess growth on that lung. Kol makom she'asru siruchat hari'ah, any place where a rabbi say that there's something attached to the sircha on the lung, אין הפרש בין שתהיה הסרחה דקה כחוט השערה, בין שתהיה עבה וחזקה ורחבה כגודל, ולא כאותם שממעכים ביד. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit of a sircha or a huge sircha, it doesn't matter. It could be a little string, it could be a thumb sticking out. All of them make the animal not kasher. And not like those that smear it off with their hand. ואם נתמחה, תולים להקל, וכל הנוהג כן כאילו מאכיל טרפות לישראל. There are people that like to smooth out the lungs with their hands and get rid of all those things. And anyone who does that is as if they're feeding non-kasher food to the Jewish people. What's the key letter here? Ki'ilu. K. It doesn't say that he's machil terefot, but the key word here is ki'ilu. It's as if you are feeding non-kasher food to the Jewish people. The Rama, if you look in section 13, he says that really you can just go in and smooth the lungs yourself. And even though afalpi shehu kula gedola, even though this is a tremendous leniency, kvar nahagu kol bnei midinot elu. All of the Jews in these countries, in Ashkenaz, we do that. Ve'en limchot biadam, machar sheyesh lehem al ma sheismochu. You shouldn't protest because at the end of the day they have on whom to rely. You just have to make sure that the person checking the animal is a God-fearing person so they won't make mistakes and they'll only serve people food that is smoothed out properly. Let me explain this outside. You have an animal. The lungs are not kasher. So according to the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, the Talmud, what do you do with an animal? On the lungs they have a sircha. Can you eat this animal or can you not eat this animal?
No, I don't think you can.
You can't. This animal is called what do we call it in Hebrew? An animal that is not kasher?
Okay.
Terefa. Very good. This animal has damaged lungs and therefore it is forbidden to eat. It's a non-kasher meat. Along come the Ashkenazim and they say, listen, you can smooth out the lungs with your fingers, like you can kind of smear off all the excess stuff that's there. And as long as it disconnects easily, that lung is considered smooth and therefore it is kasher to eat that animal. Now this led to a whole nother revolution, which was not just smoothing out, but we call kilifa. Mazal klof. Someone who speaks Hebrew?
To peel.
To peel. Not only can you smear things off, but you can even use your nails to scratch growths off. You can slice things off with your nails and pretend that the animal is kasher. Says the Rama, even though this is a crazy leniency, what do we do at the end of the day? That's the minhag. The minhag of the Ashkenazim is like that, and we don't protest because they have on whom to rely. That leads to the modern word of we said Glatt, someone said Halak. What does Glatt mean? Who speaks Yiddish? Rabbani?
Smooth.
Smooth. Very good. Glatt means smooth. No. Glatt means smooth. What does Halak mean? Smooth. Means the same thing. Now, are there differences? Could the Sephardic Halak be different than the Ashkenazi Glatt? I didn't come now, today. Yonatan Halevi didn't show up to stick my head between this Kashrut organization and that Kashrut organization and whose meat is better and which kosher restaurants you should go to and which ones should you boycott. I'm not sticking my head here. I'm saying now there's meat that comes from animals with smooth lungs and there's meat that comes from animals with problematic lungs. What do they call today in the market? Let's say you go to Israel and you want to buy meat that the animal has smooth lungs. You're going to buy meat that is Halak or meat that is Glatt. If you're going to go to a supermarket and buy meat where the animal is not Halak or Glatt, what do they call it? They call it no. Kasher. Kasher. They say it's kasher, but they don't write the word Halak. Fine. According to Maran, is that meat kasher? No, don't be scared. Stop being scared. According to Maran, that meat is terefa. According to the Rambam, is that meat kasher? No, that meat is from a terefa. According to the Talmud, is that meat kasher? No. So along comes the Rama and says, but we have a way to make terefa a keshera. We have a way to do that. What do you think the Rambam or Maran are going to consider that meat? Still not kosher. Now, what if you tell them, though, that there are tens of thousands of Jews that eat that meat? What is Maran or the Rambam going to think about those Jews?
They're breaking the law.
Okay, yeah, exactly. They're breaking the law. But it's their minhag. What do you mean? That thousands of people have this minhag. What is Maran and the Rambam going to tell you? Very good. So what? So what? You have a minhag. Now, this is where it starts to get dangerous. Why? Because the lines were not always Sephardim follow Shulchan Aruch and Ashkenazim follow the Rama. Do I have time to go with you through a letter of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef together? Can we do it? Yeah? If everyone needs to go at some point, I know that what time the show officially ends. You're welcome to just go and listen to the rest on the recording, but I would love, if you can, to stick around. I want to learn with you a letter from Chacham Ovadia Yosef, and I'll skip through the parts that are not as important. Chacham Ovadia Yosef, he writes in Yichaveh Da'at. He used to have a radio show where people asked him halakha questions. He wrote down those answers, and then later he expanded on them in a book form. I put a PDF, and it's not formatted beautifully, but I put it together at the last minute right before I ran out the door to this class. So you'll see there's an attachment in the Google Classroom that says PDF Yichaveh Da'at. You see that? Okay. She'ela. They asked Rabbi Yosef, האם יש חובה מצד הדין לכל האוכל מבשר בהמה לאכול אך ורק מבשר שיש עליו חותמת חלק או גלט? Is there an obligation, a halachic obligation, on anybody who eats meat to eat only halak or glatt meat? We're putting them in the same category for the sake of this conversation, okay? או אין זה למנהג חסידות, or is it only a custom of piety? ואפשר לאכול גם מבשר שחתום עליו כשר. Or can we also eat the meat that says on it kasher? At the beginning of this letter, Chacham Ovadia Yosef explains what does it mean, halak or glatt. Everything that I just told you about the lungs and about the Maran and the Rama, already you heard that. If you look in the next section, next paragraph, in the response of the Rashba, Mishal Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet was asked, if you're allowed to smooth out the lungs like this, Veheshiv, and he answered, Yesh lig'or harbe me'od b'mi she'oseh ken. You should protest very much against the shochet who does this. V'im yaseh ken, echad ha'shochatim b'mkomotenu, if there will be a shochet in our place, meaning the place that I have authority, says the Rashba, that will do this, anu mesalkin oto miyad min ha'shechita. We will immediately throw him out of the shechita, la'achar hatra, after we warn him. Lefi she'en lezeh shum ikar v'yisod b'talmud, because there is no Talmudic source for this leniency. And then says, concludes the Rashba, Sof davar en makom lakel b'zeh b'shum ofen klal uchlal. There is no way to be lenient about this matter at all. There is no way. There is no way to eat kasher meat. V'chen katav Rashbatz, he writes the same thing. And then he says, Shekol haoseh ken keilu machil terefot Israel, as if they're feeding non-kasher food to the Jewish people. V'chen katav b'sefer Chot Chaim, v'sefer Kol Bo, v'chen katav Rabbeinu Yerucham, b'shem Rabbeinu Tam u'gdolei Acharonim. These are all Ashkenazi rabbis who say that it's forbidden to smooth out the lungs and feed that meat to the Jewish people. V'chen pasak Maran b'Shulchan Aruch, and Maran actually rules that way in the Shulchan Aruch, like you and I already read together. But Harama b'Haga katav, I'm skipping lines, but the Rama writes in his notes, there are those who are lenient about this, and even though it's a great leniency, they still have on whom to rely. And famously, the Maharshal, Rabbi Shlomo Luria, agrees with that in his book Yam Shel Shlomo. But bebiurei Hagra, in the writings of the Gaon of Vilna, he'ir al divrei Harama mitshuvat Rashba she'asur, v'chen pasak Gra b'shiltot. The Gra says that the Rashba said it's not okay, and he's stringent about this matter. And the Vilna Gaon adds one more thing, that if someone cooks that meat, the kasher meat, according to the Rama, in your pot, before you use that pot, you have to make it kasher. Because inside of that pot was cooked non-kasher meat. Rabbi Cheskel Landau, the author of the Noda B'Yehuda, was the rabbi of which Ashkenazi place? Prague, very good. He says שהלוואי שהיו מסכימים כל חכמי ישראל לנהוג בזה, כפי פסק מרן השולחן ערוך. If only all the rabbis of the Jewish people would agree to follow the שולחן ערוך, לפי שרבו המכשולים על ידי הכולה של מיוך ומשמוש בשיחות הרע, because ultimately the line between rubbing out the lungs and actual non-kasher meat is so thin that many people make mistakes. The Gaon Ashla and the Ashla, Rabbi Shayahu Levi Horowitz, another rabbi from Ashkenaz who later became a rabbi in Israel, Katav, he writes, Binyan mi'uch u'mishmush b'sirchot ha'reya shetpashet ha'nega la'akel b'zeh b'not rabot b'chutz la'aretz, that this terrible illness of smoothing out the lungs has spread all over many countries outside of Israel. He writes that it's forbidden. V'af al pi she'arama lo ratza limchot b'mekilim b'mkomot shenagu la'asot ken. He said, even though the Rama did not want to protest, Omnam kinat Hashem tzevaot ta'aseh zot levilti shamua l'minhag hara hazeh, says the Shla, the chief Ashkenazi rabbi of Jerusalem at the time. He says, it is forbidden to enable this minhag, and he calls it an evil minhag. V'ani mitzaveh et habanim banai, and I command my sons, shelo le'echol basar hanichshal mikoach miuch u'mishmush, not to buy meat that is made in the Ashkenazi way. Ve'al tiknu basar meat, please, ad shetidreshu v'tachkiru achar zeh, until you don't buy meat from any butcher shop until you verify they don't do this. V'yadua sheminhag Eretz Yisrael hatrif, and it's known that the minhag of Eretz Yisrael is to make this meat taref. V'chen haminhag bechol tefutot Yisrael hayoshvim al malchut Tugrama, and anyone under the Ottoman Empire also was careful about this. Gam chokhmat adam b'sefer Sharei Tzedek, the chokhmat adam, that's what I quoted to you before. Rabbi Avraham Danzig writes the same thing. And he says that in Eretz Yisrael, yesh lachuf u'lachriach et ha'ashkenazim ha'olim le'eretz Yisrael linhog minhag ha'sefaradim. You should force the Ashkenazim to follow the Sephardim in Israel. Sharei HaRambam u'Maran HaShulchan Aruch hem hamari de'atra shel Eretz Yisrael. He said, because the rabbis Maran and the Rambam are the rabbis of Eretz Yisrael. This is, who writes this? An Ashkenazi rabbi. ועוד שאף בחוץ לארץ גדולי הרבנים צופחים ככרוכיה למנהג הרע של מיעוך הסרחות. This is an interesting word. כרוכיה. Kuchia seems to be, I'm not certain, but it seems to be a crane like the bird. The rabbis outside of Israel are also screaming about this. But what can you do? Nobody's listening to the rabbis. And ultimately, we should wage war against the people who are lenient about this. And he goes, keeps going. All through this letter, I would read you all the sources, but perhaps another time we'll have a shiur on this exact topic. He spends a significant amount of time here about whether Ashkenazim have to follow Sephardic law once they come to Israel. It's so beyond the scope of today's conversation, and it's sometimes a way that Sephardim bully Ashkenazim into following their rules. I'm not interested in this moment to do that. Maybe towards the end of the Teshuvah. Hagaon Arishon LeTzion Yisa Beracha, one of the Sephardic chief rabbis of Israel, writes, he complained about some of the Sephardim ועדות המזרח בקודש ירושלים תבנה ותכונן, who lived in Yerushalayim, שאוכלים בשר משחיטת האשכנזים, who ate Ashkenazi slaughtered meat, who were not careful about this, שהם עוברים על דברי מרן שקיבלנו הוראותיו ולא יעשה כן בישראל, that they are violating the rules of Shulchan Aruch, and they should not do that. And therefore concludes Chama Yosef, which kind of meat should you buy? Only meat that is halak. Can you be lenient about this, says Maran, says Rabbi Yosef? No, there's no room to be lenient about it at all. And even if there were rabbis who were lenient about it, there is nothing that you can do. Now, I attached, for fairness' sake, I want to be fair, I attached a PDF of an article written by a friend of mine, Rabbi Rafael Deloya. He's the head of a group of Moroccan rabbis in Israel. As you may know, that in Morocco, there were great chachamim who ate meat that was not halak, that was kasher. Here, he quotes numerous Torah scholars. If I were to tell you who they are, from which countries, for sure I mentioned you from Morocco. He mentions that it was also in Tunis, in Tripoli, in Persia, in Iran, in Greece, in Saloniki, in Turkey. There were even some places in Yemen where they were a little more lenient, not exactly the same, but a little more lenient. In Tveria, there was such a reality. In Eretz Yisrael, there was such a reality. Rabbi Yosef Mesas was, Rabbi Shalom Mesas. Many great chachamim who we otherwise learned their Torah were very clear that the minhag already became not like the Shulchan Aruch and not like the Rambam, and therefore we eat that meat. I'm sure that you know that in this Beit HaMikdash, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Rabbi Yosef Mesas, Rabbi Shalom Mesas, for most of the chachamim that are quoted here, that are lenient about this matter. But I'm certain also that you know that my loyalty to the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, is much greater than my loyalty to anywhere else. For which reason? For the reason that I cannot expect that the Jewish people are going to ever be united if every minhag that we had everywhere is now going to be able to shake up the whole world of halakha. And it has to be. It has to be that we have some standard that we can all agree on to do something. The Talmud should be our standard. And if the Rambam rules like the Talmud, the Shulchan Aruch rules like the Talmud, so with all respect to the rabbis who did not follow the Talmud because of this minhag, or this other understanding of halakha, or that other understanding of halakha, I respect it, but there's not much that I'm willing to do with it. I'm not going to tell you that those people are eating meat that are not kasher. I'm going to tell you that if anyone is to ask me, I'm looking to be particular about the laws of kashrut, be particular about this one. Buy meat that is of the most excellent hechsher possible. Not hashgacha, hechsher in terms of hashgacha. Hechsher in terms of actual slaughtered properly. Let me jump right back into Rabbi Shemtob Gaguine with you as we wrap up today's shiur. Okay? He gives us a summary of everything we just read right now. And then he says, V'ayin ro'ah, and your eye can see. I'm in the middle of that page 26 in the PDF, or 28 in the Roman numerals. Maran Skeni Kvod Morenu Harav Shalom Moshe Chai Gaguine, that my grandfather, his ancestor, Rabbi Shlomo Moshe Chai Gaguine, was a rabbi in Jerusalem. He wrote in his book, Yismach Lev, he testified, Shagaon Bal Imrei Bina Amarlo, the Rabbi Imrei Bina told him, Limin Hayom Shabati Lishkon Kavod B'Yerushalayim, that since I came to live in Jerusalem, נזהרני מלאכול בשר במיעוך שיחה אלא דווקא מבשר שלא נפל בה שום ספק כיוון שקבעתי לקבוע דירתי אתרי דמרן בית יוסף. Now that I live in Israel, I follow the rulings of the Shulchan Aruch and I will never eat meat that is not halak. אתה הורית לדעת Therefore, says Rabbi Shemtob Gaguine, you have come to see. כי לחינם נתקבל הרמה למחמיר בעיני המונha. That it's for nothing. It's not even true. That which in the eyes of the people, the Ashkenazi halacha is considered always the most stringent interpretation of halacha. אלא אדרבה, to the contrary. הוכחנו לקוראים מאיזה דוגמאות אשר ליקטתי אחת הנה ואחת הנה. I collected all of these examples from here and there. שמגמתו הייתה למצוא היתר, וכוח להיתר עדיף. That he usually was lenient, and even though it's a good thing usually to be lenient. אמנם בהלכות טרפות ואיסור והיתר הרבה חומות נוספות. Then you find in other places how the Rama is excessively stringent. And he bases his stringencies on all kinds of also other than Talmudic rulings, like those opinions of the Tosafot, and the Moharil, and the Rosh, and the Balaturim, and the Isur Veter, and the Shari Dura, and the Or Zarua, and the Hagot Ashrein, the Mordechai, and so on and so forth, Maran Rothenberg, and the Smak, and the Kolbo, and he quotes all of these books that also provide extra legal stringencies. And so he tells us two more things. V'avi lefanecha din mechudash shekatvo harokach. There's a famous rabbi, the Rokach, that he wrote bedin nimuk halashon ad hatultelet kasher, אבל אם התולתלת טרפה, והגאון הפרי חדש צווח עליו ואמר וכי להוסיף על טרפיות הוא בא. There is a Bala Rokach, he made an extra stringency to what makes an animal not kasher. And along comes the Pri Chadash, and he says, what, are you looking to make more animals not kasher? We don't want stringencies, and we don't want leniencies. We simply want to follow the law. You find, by the way, in the Talmud, if you look in footnote 5, Amar Chaber, he brings an example from the Tosefta. That Rabbi Chalafta once said that a certain thing in the world is impure, and the Chachamim disagreed with him. He said, but the rabbi said, it is good. So for the rabbi it can be impure, and for the rest of the Jewish people it's pure. Later in history, you had Rabbi Shimon Parachia. Rabbi Shimon Parachia was the rabbi of Jesus, of Yeshu. He decided that certain grains that came from Alexandria in Egypt, that those grains are impure. And the rabbi said, but they're pure. He said, you know what? For Rabbi Shimon Parachia, they're impure, and for the rest of the Jewish people, they're pure. If a certain Chacham wants to come along in history and decide that certain things that for us are okay are not okay, he's allowed to. In his own house, he can do whatever he wants. But for the rest of the Jewish people, he's not allowed to impose his non-Talmudic standards on the rest of us. And Rabbi Shemtob Gaguine leaves us with one last question at the top of page 29 or 27 of the PDF. Nishar lanu ladat. So therefore, I need to understand. מה הייתה הסיבה? What was the reason? שהביאה להרמה לקחת החופש לעצמו, להקל בכמה הלכות שהתלמוד וגדולי הראשונים החמירו בכל תוקף, והוא התירם. The real question of the hour is, on which basis did the Rama allow himself the luxury or the freedom to directly contradict the rulings of the Talmud and the rabbis of our generations if he was supposedly following halacha? How could he allow himself to argue with the Talmud? My friends, the answer to that question is going to come next week. But for this week, I wanted to summarize our shiur as follows. I started off by telling you how happy I was to be here after all the technical difficulties and how we haven't had an opportunity to learn together in a long time. But that I feel like we've learned together for a very long time because everything that we've talked about today are things that we've discussed together over the last many years. That this Beit HaMikdash is made up of individuals who are always able and willing to think outside of the box and to think differently than the way other people have allowed them to think. One of our earliest classes in the UK was called Permission to Think. You must allow yourself the freedom to question the social norms and the communal standards of the Jewish community around you. If you don't reserve that right to yourself, you'll be swallowed up alive and become a herd like the rest of the herd. And that's something that we are opposed to on every level. But what gives us freedom? Our rabbis tell us we are free through the Torah. When you know Torah for yourself, and you know sources of halacha for yourself, and you are in a world of people that are trying to confuse you, or belittle you, or tell you that you have no clue what you're talking about, how praiseworthy is the person who comes and always has their Torah learning in their hands. How wonderful has it been in the past when people have tried to say that you don't keep kosher, that you're not observant, you don't know what Shabbat is, that you don't know anything about your Judaism, and you know exactly where in the Rambam that law is found, or Shulchan Aruch, or which class you heard it in, or what place you found it in. The freedom and the power that you have given yourself is proof that knowledge is power. My goal and my hope in the coming weeks is we learn together next week and then for a few more weeks after Pesach. And for those of you that are in the UK, I'm bringing my whole family for the first time to London, and I really, really would love the opportunity to introduce them to you in person. I'm going to be there for a whole week, so I'm coming in for a wedding, but I'm hoping to stay a little bit extra, and we took the time to stay extra because I'm really, really hoping to continue the personal connections that we've made as Rabbanit and I, as individuals, with our entire family. We consider you to be part of our family always, and part of our community too. My hope is that you will recognize that knowledge is always power, and the more Torah that you learn, the freer you will be, and that we should accomplish that together. It's not liberty from the Torah, but it's liberty in the Torah. It's liberty with the Torah. And next week we're going to answer. The Rama has a good reason for why he did what he did. And ultimately, it resulted in one very sad thing. In the Jewish community being torn into two. I would argue the Jewish community today is torn into 202. We are so many different denominations of Judaism that I wish it was just Sephardic and Ashkenazi. That's not even a divide anymore. And inside of those are so many more subcategories. And the only hope that we can have in the last two classes after Pesach about the coming of a redemption, the betterment of a Jewish society, it can only happen when we agree to agree. When we agree to do things together. When we agree that our functionality as a nation is more important than our ego or our customs or our heritage or our pride as individuals. That sometimes we have to learn that being together is more important than many other things. And the best way to be together is to follow in the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And God willing, we'll get to that. I don't want to put the carriage before the horse. But for right now, thank you for the opportunity of learning Torah with me. I missed you all very, very much. I'm so happy to see your faces on screen. Even those of you who don't have your faces on the screen, I'm really happy to see you as well. B'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach, I look forward to learning many, 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 many more years of Torah together with you until we all meet in Yerushalayim, where ultimately is all where we want to be. Until then, I'm praying for the safety and security of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Israel, for our soldiers that are on the borders and are past the borders. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should watch over them and protect them. They should go in peace. They should come back home to their families in peace and in security. And we should only learn together in many happy occasions.